Welcome to the Running for Real podcast, where each week we bring you a conversation designed to help you create positive change in your life, community, and planet. It's a collective of conversations about running, the climate emergency, and social justice. Running for Real is for the brave, for those with courage and vulnerability. United by our love of running, we're driving momentum towards some of the really tough challenges we're facing as humanity. So come join me, Tina Muir, and let's get started. Hello, my friends. Welcome to episode 242 of the Running for Real podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm excited you are here, excited for you to get to know my guest. And I am excited because there is another episode of Running Realized coming out in a few days. What have you thought of the first few episodes? If you have had a listen and you could leave a review or share with us, we are loving seeing these come in. Last time, episode 3 was about how we are disconnected from ourselves and just how we can reconnect. It was a really powerful episode and I hope you enjoyed it. So we have another one coming just a few days, but this is Running for Real. Gets a bit confusing there with the titles there. Running Realized and Running for Real is definitely great to be connected, but I have to admit it gets a little bit confusing in my mind trying to remember which one is which one I am doing at the time. And so, yeah, let's get on to today's episode. I am excited to introduce you to Tony Reed, who is the co-founder and executive director of the National Black Marathoners Association. He is a wonderful human. After Running Realized episode 1 with Samia Akbar and Marilyn Bevans, he reached out to me and just said the most wonderful, kind things. And then we got chatting and I got to know him. And I really appreciate all he's done for the running community and continues to do. You're going to hear about some of that today. He's just a really wonderful human. And I think you're going to enjoy getting to know him and be inspired by him. And also learn how to take that passion you have within the area of your own life and channel it into other things. I'm excited for you to get to know Tony, so we're just going to take a moment to thank one of our sponsors and we'll be right to the episode. Thank you to Momentous for sponsoring this episode of the Running for Real podcast. I am really thankful to be working with this company, and I keep teasing to you, but I still can't say anything just yet. But there is some really exciting changes that they are making to really make a big reduction in their carbon footprint. I can't really say much more than that at this point, but I feel really, really good about the direction the company is going in. And I just feel like they care. So I'm excited to share more about that sometime soon. Now, I've mentioned each of the products that I use through this podcast, and I am actually testing out one of the new ones, which is Brain Drive, which is to kind of optimize your thinking as I struggle to think, optimize your focus. And it's something that I just want to make sure that I give some time before I speak out about. But so far, I've really been enjoying it and finding it very helpful when I have my little bursts of time where I can do work in the mornings. And so that's been something really helpful. I have mentioned before, and I'll mention it again, I have really been enjoying the Elite sleep. I have had a few nights where I could tell I was flustered and unable to sleep. And when I have taken that before bed, I have found it to really help me to settle my mind and to drift off to sleep, even when there is a lot on my mind. And I've never really found that before, especially when I've tried to just use melatonin on my own. So I definitely am enjoying the Momentous Elite sleep. And also, I have been really trying out the creatine lately, not all the time. I'm not trying to bulk myself up, but it's just been an enjoyable thing that I can use. And if you are an older athlete, that is something that's really going to help your body with some of the things that occur with aging. That is, by taking additional creatine, it's going to help your body to balance out the changes that your body is going to be going through losing that muscle mass that's going to happen over time. So you can get 20% off your order at livemomentous.com. That's livemomentous.com. By using code TINA, you can get 20% off your order. Go check them out. They've got lots of other products on there you can go check out. And thank you so much to Momentous. Tony, thank you so much for joining me today on the Running for Real podcast. I am excited you are here. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. And there is so much I could be sharing about you. You have done so much for the running community. And honestly, I have no idea how you fit all that you have managed to do into your life. I mean, it's pretty incredible to look through all the accomplishments you've done in work, in running. And I know that gets said a lot when your name is involved because you do manage it. But I really encourage people to go check out your website to just see the full list of all these things because it's just impressive. So do you have some extra hours in the day that you found somewhere? And if so, please tell me the secret.
Well, one of the things I like to tell people is when they look at my accomplishments, to remember that it took me about 40 years in order to do it. And for every one of my accomplishments that I have, I've known individuals who have done it in 1 year. So between 100 marathons in a year, another friend of mine, Lisa Davis, has set the Guinness Book of Records for running marathons on all 7 continents. It took her like 7 days and about 30 minutes or something. And it took me years in order to do that. It took me from 1982 to 2009 to run 100 marathons. And it took me a long time to do marathons in all 50 states. But
I think that's a really good point to begin with and to go into, actually, because that's a very good example of someone like me or someone listening going to a website for anything and seeing someone and seeing all these things and thinking, how could I ever do anything as much as that? Or how could you're over 100 marathons, and according to your website, it's 131. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, or is it? Okay. So 131 marathons, that just, blows my mind. I'm at 4 or whatever, 7, 10, 15. I can't even imagine doing that many. And to see those things and think, I could never do that. But I think it's a really good point you mentioned there, that we so often look at the snapshot, but we don't look at either what goes behind the scenes or how long it took. So anything else along those lines that you've noticed within yourself or within others about just not giving ourselves enough credit of what we could do if we give it time?
yeah, I think there is a tendency nowadays for people to want to do things quickly and rapidly. And I think with social media, it puts pressure on people to do things more quickly. When I first started running marathons, I ran my first one in 1982, and I was the sole financial support for my family. So I just couldn't go off and run marathons all over the country. In fact, I set a very long-term goal of running just 2 marathons a year. That was going to be the Dallas Marathon and the Cowtown Marathon. And because I was what I would call financially challenged, my first goal was to run 50 marathons in one state. And I realized that by doing those 2 marathons a year, by the time I reached my 50th marathon, my children would be grown and out the house, and I can actually go travel to different races when I run. So I literally ran 47 marathons in Texas before I even ran a marathon outside of the state. And so again, that took almost 20 years in order for me to do that. And so my goal was, when my kids got out the house, I can then kind of travel and see the world. So, and when I see some of the younger runners coming up today running 10 or 12 marathons in a year, the question I ask myself is, are they going to still be running when they're in their 60s?
Yeah.
So for me, it's a lifetime commitment.
I love that approach. And I think that's very important to mention, particularly when it comes to the travel aspect, as that was a thought that flashed through my mind when I was looking through all that you'd done. And I thought, wow, and I actually thought about that as a question to you, like, oh, you must love to travel. You must have always been a traveler. How do you manage to do this traveling? But yeah, you're right. You waited to the right time in your life. You waited till you got to the right point in your life where you could do it. And so, yeah, a really good point to make. And thank you for mentioning that. So we've already said you have done 131 marathons. And I mean, I'm not sure, but that to me sounds like you are possibly the wisest, most experienced marathoner I've come across. So for approaching a marathon, and for someone who's maybe done one or not done any, but thinking about it, or done a few, what are some of the lessons that you have learned as you look back on them as a whole?
Okay, that's a good question. Again, I'll kind of take a look at what has happened on social media. I think there's a lot of pressure. I think there's more pressure today on people to run marathons than there was when I first started.
Yeah.
And in social media, when a person finishes a race, you'll see them holding up their finisher's medal. Mm-hmm. But to me, the two questions that I ask is, was the person really prepared for the marathon? And how did they feel the day after the marathon? Mm-hmm. So I find that a lot of people get into training for a marathon and they don't have a solid base. For me, as a coach, I recommend people have a solid base of 1,000 to 1,200 miles for 12 months before they even begin the marathon training program.
So you're saying they have run at least 1,000 miles within the year before, or in their life?
Within the year before.
Okay.
And in running that 1,000 miles, one, they learn how to deal with the challenges of training for a marathon, going through all different types of weather, for fitting it in their lifestyle, and for fitting it in their schedule. And then when they start the marathon training program, they have a much higher probability of success. And after the marathon is over, they're not going to feel, like totally exhausted and basically that they're just going, well, yeah, I dragged myself across the finish line, but now my body is just totally beat down. So for me, it's all about having a rock solid base.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Also, when I ran my first marathon, the prevailing wisdom was, if you couldn't do it in under 4 hours, don't even attempt it. So it was more than just about finishing the marathon in 6 or 7 hours. You actually had to work hard in order to get there to that 4-hour time period. And I was not the traditional marathoner. I'm 6 feet tall. I weigh 200 pounds. So I'm built more like a running back than I am a distance runner. Mm. And I finished the first marathon in 3 hours and 59 minutes. But I really had to work hard in order to make that happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would absolutely believe that. And are there some things you see in common with during the race itself? So maybe you notice that there's always a period where it seems too tough to surmount, but then somehow you do it. I guess just more that, like, it's easy when you're in the single digits, which I am too for marathon. I think I've even lost count. I think I've done 6. To say, oh, once you get to 25, 50, you know what you're doing. You don't experience those real setbacks because you got this, I got this. So what are some things that you see in common with most, if not all, of the marathons that you've done?
Well, I think the thing that I see in common with all of them, and for me, this is going to sound crazy, but I love music. And the one thing that's in common with every marathon that I've run is I always have a theme song in my head. So when I run, I don't listen to music. I'm focused on the environment around me. But I have songs associated with all of my different running marathons.
And you pick that ahead of time?
It usually comes to me at the starting line.
Interesting.
So, for example, at the Tuvalu Marathon, it started in the wee hours of the morning. And they suggested that we carry flashlights with us because it was still dark. So I was singing Flashlight by Parliament Funkadelic. At the Hartford, Connecticut Marathon, we had 5.5 inches of rain during the race. And it
Wow.
was just a downpour from the start to the finish. And at the starting line of the race, I found myself singing the lyrics to Cycle Alpha Distica Beta Bio Aqua Loop, which is
Mm-hmm.
also sung by Parliament Funkadelic. And the short version of the song, the name is Aqua Boogie. And so he talks about dancing underwater without getting wet. And I visualized myself running this marathon and the raindrops were parting and I was perfectly dry in this torrential downpour.
I love that. That's so cool.
So for me, I always have a theme song for every marathon that I've run.
Uh-huh. And
Yeah.
I love that. And then what about the best marathon experiences? When you look back on your favorite ones, were they ones where you were really struggling and you made it through and got to the finish line anyway? Or were they ones where you felt on fire, maybe had a great time the entire time, or something else?
Well, for me, the most beautiful marathon I ran was the French Riviera Marathon.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And it went from Nice to Cannes. You had the beautiful Mediterranean on your left the entire time and these beautiful French villas on the right.
Yes.
The high that day was 52 and the low was 56. And there weren't any really memorable hills on the course.
Mm-hmm.
So that one would be I would consider my most beautiful marathon.
That's going on my list for sure. Now you've said that. I never even considered one in like that area in Nice. But wow, that is a beautiful place to run for sure. Okay.
And
right. What else?
My favorite marathon course is the Dallas White Rock Marathon. That's one where I've run that marathon 21 times. And it's also the one where I happen to set my PR, which is, 336? 336 or 334. But I was in the best shape of my life. I was about a mile and a half from the finish line. And it occurred to me that I had not stopped and walked the entire race. And I said, let me just stop and walk 25 yards. And I stopped, I walked 25 yards, and then I picked it on up again. And there's just something in my mind about not wanting to run the perfect race.
Oh, really?
I just didn't want to have that pressure, I guess, of...
For like future races after that one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so I like keeping running in perspective. Running is not my life. And in fact, in social media, for example, on Facebook, a lot of the people that I'm connected with personally on Facebook are not distance runners. And it was interesting for me to hear Marilyn Bevans speak. Mm-hmm. And Marilyn once said that the worst thing you can have is to have all of your friends are runners. Because the day that you stop being a runner or you get injured, all your friends go away. Yeah. So you need to focus on your family and your non-running friends because they're always going to be there with you and for you.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Yeah, I remember when she said that. So Tony is referring to episode 1 of Running Realized, which is what actually connected Tony and I when you reached out to me after hearing that episode featuring Samia Akbar and Marilyn Bevans. And yeah, she did talk about that. And that was something that is very important and does have a big impact, but it's something that I don't think many people would think about, because it is very easy to surround yourself with people who do what you do. But yeah, I think that's a very good point. And I do cherish my friends who are non-runners as well. Especially if you find yourself injured, because then your runner friends, you're stumped as to what to talk about. So if you don't have running as a focus there, so I appreciated that as well. So if you don't mind me asking, with that episode, I'd love to hear your thoughts for someone who hasn't listened to that show yet or hasn't given Running Realized a try. What was your experience of what that was?
Okay. I enjoyed the interviews, and I met Marilyn Bevans back in 2013. Mm-hmm. In fact, the way we ended up connecting was through Andy Burford from Runner's World.
Yep.
He was in the process of writing a book about influential women in distance running, and he reached out to me to find out if I had any connections with Marilyn Bevans. And I had never heard of her. She wasn't in our database. So I did some research and found out that she placed second in the 1977 Boston Marathon.
Yeah.
And I found myself asking, why would he reach out to me to see if she was in our database when we're the National Black Marathoners Association? So I kept hunting around and found a video of her doing an interview and was shocked to find out that she was African American. I had been running, bear in mind, going back to high school since 1969, running marathons since 1982, and here we are 30 years later, and I'm just now hearing about Marilyn Bevans.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So I went to our board of directors and was sharing information with them about her, and they were just totally shocked and surprised because they had never heard of her. So then they said, well, have you heard of a guy named gentleman named Ted Corbitt? And I said, well, yes, I remember reading about him, in fact, in this book called The Complete Marathoner. So back in the day when I started running marathons, social media wasn't around, so the only way you can really find out how to run a marathon was by reading books.
Yeah.
And in this book, it's interesting, they start off each chapter with a quote, and then they would have like a picture of the runner. And I always assumed that that was a person that made the quote. This is a quote by Ken Young, and I believe this is indeed a picture of Ken Young. Then they had a quote by Gary Corbitt. And they showed a white gentleman sitting there with his hands in his head. His head in his hands. And then later on, they have another quote by Ted Corbitt and a gentleman with a Pioneer running shirt. So I had no idea who Ted Corbitt was. And in that particular chapter, they're talking about the course measurement techniques and processes. And that is the one thing that Ted Corbitt was famous for, one of the many things. But you had to go another almost 200 pages in the book where they finally give Ted Corbitt the credit for coming up with the process for measuring race courses. So I'm reading this, and I had no idea that Ted Corbitt was an African American. So as the board members and I were talking about this, we said, we need to do something to recognize the accomplishments of these distance runners. So we started the National Black Distance Running Hall of Fame in 2013. And the first two people that we inducted was, of course, Marilyn Bevans and Ted Corbitt.
Yes. I'm really glad that more information is starting to arise. I mean, long overdue. And as much as I don't want to ask this, because I know how frustrating it is, and I appreciate your patience here, but I do still think that there are quite a lot of people who maybe have no idea of what Ted Corbitt has done for the running community, what his accomplishments were. So if you wouldn't mind, and again, I appreciate your patience, with the white running community for just being slow to understand this and listen. But maybe if you could share some of those things so just people can have a bit more insight into, we've heard about Marilyn Bevans, or at least I hope people have through the Running Realize episode, and then we'll go on to read more about her. But Ted Corbitt, other than Knox and I mentioning him a little bit, that might be all people have known. So if you could tell us a bit more about him, that would be appreciated.
Okay. Well, I know a lot of your listeners have heard of the New York City Marathon.
Yep, I'd imagine so.
A little small race in New York
Yeah.
City. Ted Corbitt is the one who came up with the concept of the 5-borough race. He was also one of the first presidents of the New York Roadrunners Club, as well as for the Roadrunners Club of America. In 1955 and 1957, he was on the winning team of the Boston Marathon. People didn't realize that there is an actual team competition there at the Boston Marathon. And he was also the first African American on the Olympic marathon team in 1952. And so he's an ultra marathoner, a marathoner. He has set age group records in distances from the marathon all the way up to, I believe, the 24-hour race and 100-mile race. So he is the person that they generally call the father of distance running in the U.S.
Yeah, I've heard that many times. And thank you for sharing that.
One of the projects that we're working on right now is we've realized that there are no distance runners on U.S. postage stamps. And so we have started a program to try to get Ted Corbitt on a U.S. postage stamp under the Black Heritage Series. So it's
so cool.
So we have information. All you have to do is write a letter, and we want to see if we can make that happen.
Yeah, okay, so let's pause that right there. What can someone listening do right now? Like for this, you said write a letter. Is there somewhere they can go to know what to write in that letter, or do you want to tell them? Like, let's make this happen. What do we need to do?
Okay, so we're going to have information on the Black Marathoners website, which is blackmarathoners.org. It will be there this afternoon.
Mm-hmm. I'll put a link as well.
What they would have to do is simply writing a letter to the stamp selection committee stating that you would like to see a postage stamp with Ted Corbitt.
Okay.
Kind of let them know why. And they said the whole process takes between 2 to 3 years. Mm-hmm. And this committee meets once a quarter.
Okay.
So, we want to go ahead and try to make this happen.
Mm-hmm. And if you don't mind me breaking it down even more, so it would be like, hello, my name is X. I live in this state or this city. I am recommending, or I would like to encourage you to feature a Ted Corbitt stamp in the future because, whatever reasons people feel most appeal to them or were inspiring to them of what Ted has done. Yes. I look forward to seeing him on a stamp. Sincerely, X.
It's just that's what
we're looking for. Okay,
and there's a website that his son Gary has called tedcorbitt.com.
Yep.
Where you can really go there and find out a lot of things that Ted Corbitt had accomplished, both as a runner as well as someone in the running industry, in the running organizations.
Yes.
And there's just a ton of information there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Well, let's make this happen. I will get my letter written by the time this comes out, and I encourage everyone listening. Let's do it. If you do it, take a picture, put it on social media, show us that you are doing this, and that's a simple thing that can be done. That can I shouldn't say your part, but be a part in changing things here. Back to your story. You mentioned to me before we started recording that running came into your life at age 7. So as you've said earlier, you want to make running a lifelong thing. So far you're doing a pretty good job. Tell us, how did running appear for you age 7?
Okay. When I was around 7, I was diagnosed with a pre-diabetic condition. And the doctor said that I would go on insulin by the time I was a teenager. Wow. I was fortunate. I went to a high school where sports were mandatory, and I ended up participating in cross country and subsequently lost weight. We didn't quite understand at that time the connection between level of fitness and diabetes. In college, I read a book by Dr. Kenneth Cooper where there was one paragraph in the book that said diabetics who are dependent on insulin could either decrease their insulin intake or go completely off of it if they maintained a fitness program. So in 1974, I set a lifetime goal of what I will call running, walking, or crawling about 3 miles a day.
Mm-hmm.
I've kept a running journal since 1976, and as of last year, I had logged about 45,000 miles of running, averaged exactly 3.03 miles a day of running.
Wow.
And I'll be 66 this year, and I'm still not on insulin.
Amazing.
So, and while I was in high school, by the way, I worked with a gentleman who lost his eye due to glaucoma, had his toes amputated, had his leg amputated, and ultimately lost his life all due to complications with diabetes. So for me, it was very personal. Running marathons was actually secondary to me just keeping that 3 mile a day average of running. Now, around the same time that they discovered I was pre-diabetic, my mother introduced my brother and me to collecting postage stamps. So visualize two little kids living in a St. Louis inner city with this geeky hobby called, collecting postage stamps from all over the world. And this is when you can go into a drugstore and for 50 cents buy a bag of, like 300 or 400 used postage stamps from all around the world.
Oh,
So we
wow.
were getting these postage stamps, but there were countries that were not in our stamp collection, that were not in our stamp album. So these were countries that had just gained their independence over in Africa. And every time a country gained its independence, it would always change four things: the name of the country, the flag, its currency, and the postage stamps. So my brother and I were learning about history and geography in real time as it was happening at an age when a lot of kids couldn't even name all 50 states.
Yeah.
We could name, we knew, the Belgium Congo was now Zaire. And so we were able to know all these different things that were going on an international level. And it really piqued our interest. And so our mission was to see the world, was to get out of the projects, was to get out of the ghetto and literally to travel to see the entire world. So my brother Curtis ended up spending 18 years over in Africa. And some of that time, I think he may have spent maybe a year in France and in Portugal. So he ended up learning to speak Arabic, Portuguese, and French fluently, as well as probably a couple of other languages. And again, like I said, he ended up traveling the world. And so for me, it just seemed quite natural. Once my kids got up and, they got out of the house, then for me to also travel and see the world, which is what led to me running marathons on the 7 continents.
Thank you to Inside Tracker for sponsoring this episode of the Running for Real podcast. Do you want to run further and faster and recover quicker and easier? Do you need to feel healthier than you've ever felt before? You need to make a change, and that is what Inside Tracker is all about. Founded by leading scientists in aging, genetics, and biometric data from MIT, Tufts, and Harvard, Inside Tracker is a personalized health and wellness platform like no other. So what is their secret? Well, first, Inside Tracker uses its patented algorithm to analyze your body's data and offer you a clearer picture than you've ever had before of what's going on inside you. Then, Inside Tracker provides you with concrete, science-backed, trackable action plan for reaching your performance goals and being your healthy best. You want to hear the great part? Inside Tracker is offering my listeners 25% off. Yes, 25% off discount to their entire store, all of the options you can look at there. You can go to insidetracker.com/Tina because change is an inside job.
Our mission was to see the world. Was to get out of the projects, was to get out of the ghetto, and literally to travel to see the entire world. So my brother Curtis ended up spending 18 years over in Africa. And some of that time, I think he may have spent maybe a year in France and in Portugal. So he ended up learning to speak Arabic, Portuguese, and French fluently, as well as probably a couple of other languages. And again, like I said, he ended up traveling the world. And so for me, it just seemed quite natural. Once my kids got up and, they got out of the house, then for me to also travel and see the world, which is what led to me running marathons on the 7 continents.
I love that. Cool. So let's go on to that a little bit more then. You mentioned about running on the 7 continents. You've done the hat trick, which is the at least 100 marathons, the marathon in 7 continents, and a marathon in each of the 50 states, which is pretty impressive in whatever way you look at it. But I love that you have maintained the goal. It doesn't seem within you that it's like you just chase like people patting you on the back, or chase like numbers, or pushing yourself just for like, I've got all these like inner things going on and I just need to pummel myself into the ground. Like, it seems like there's a genuine just love for the sport, love for being out there, just appreciation. So would you agree with that? And if so, why is your approach to running, it sounds crazy to say, but so healthy, when I see various elements of my own running of when it hasn't been a healthy approach. So how did you come to that way of saying, I'm going to do things and I'm going to challenge myself, but it's also not the most important thing?
Oh, again, when I first started running marathons, I ended up having to read a lot of books. And one of the books by Dr. George Sheehan described what he called the 3 phases of running, where the first phase is jogging, which is kind of like where we just kind of get out there, you feel uncomfortable doing it, and it's that intro stage. Then he said the second stage was racing, and that is when it's like, oh my goodness, you just have to race every weekend. And then the third stage, he says, if you survive the racing stage and you don't get injured, you make it to that third stage, that running stage, where you can just kind of leave your watch at home. You can just go out and you can just enjoy running for the sake of running. What I'm seeing today is a lot of people get caught up in the racing stage. And I can remember when I first started running, the only time they ever gave a medal was if you finished a marathon. Then over time, they started awarding medals for everything from 1 mile, all the way up through a marathon. And a lot of runners get caught up in what we refer to as bling blindness.
Yeah, I like that.
It's all about just running around, gotta get a medal. And in doing so, they really never get out of this racing stage. They just really can't enjoy running for the sake of running. When I look at the pandemic and what that did as far as shutting down in-person races, I'm hoping that it gave people an opportunity just to reflect on why they're doing this. Are they running for the medals, or, are they running for their health? Are they running to relieve stress? So I'm hoping more people get into this kind of running mode. It's not about the competition. It's not about the medals. It's about just enjoying what God has given us. There's beautiful trees, lakes to run around, watching nature. And when I run here at White Rock Lake, I enjoy watching in the springtime, where I could see little baby ducklings following their mother around while she's swimming, and over the course of the year, watching them grow up and fly away. So for me, running can be and should be relaxing. and it's not about the medals. Uh,
I
so the
am
medals
with you
that
there.
are hanging up over here, these medals were actually in a trash can. These are all marathon medals. So I had these medals in a trash can. And whenever my grandchildren would come over, they would go to the trash can and they would be playing with the medals. So they really weren't all that important to me. And then when I ended up moving and they grew up, I just went ahead and put them up on the wall. But I didn't and wasn't running for medals.
Yeah. It is an impressive wall, though. I will make sure to take a screenshot of this and put it in the show notes so people can go see. This is pretty cool to look at. No, I love hearing you say that. I think that's very important to mention. And I haven't heard that about the three phases and or stages, but that does seem to go along with what we see. And you're right that I do think 2020 gave people a year to pause and have to think about outside of racing. The question is, once races do come back, will people be able to hang on to that? Or will we get sucked right back into where we were? And that applies across the board with this pandemic, right? There's so many things that we've learned, but have we learned enough to not make the same mistake again? We'll find out.
Yes.
Okay, so just going a little bit deeper into something that connects with running, but is just part of life for you. You have all these accolades, positions, degrees, management that you've done. In addition to 2 masters, you've taught some classes, you're a running coach yourself. Are you someone who likes to learn and grow and find new ways of just building your mind? Or is it something else that drives you to keep achieving and finding new things?
Well, I used to have a sign on my desk that said, when you're through learning, you're through.
Yes.
And when I was when I was an undergraduate student, I remember reading about a gentleman who said that every 5 years, you need to put yourself in a learning mode. And instead of being that of a teacher and being that of a business manager or executive. And so that's essentially what I ended up doing was every 5 years, again, professionally, I got my MBA. And then 5 years after that, I got got a master's in accounting, then professional certifications, again, just kind of looking at everything from the long run, just like I did with distance running.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up getting certifications in supply chain management, accounting, project management, and just like I didn't do 100 marathons in a year, it took 30 or 40 years in order for those things to happen. I like to say one of the things that running taught me was to go through and do a self-analysis, to look at my weak points. If I wanted to get faster, I had to run faster. I had to go and do speed work at the track. I had to do tempo runs. Same thing in business. I would look at a situation and would look at, well, what are my weaknesses? So, for example, people in corporate America found it hard to believe that I was managing multi-million-dollar international projects. And in order for me to prove to them that I knew how to go about managing budgets, I ended up getting a master's degree in accounting and passing the CPA exam. So again, looking at what is a real or perceived weakness and then doing something to prove that, this is indeed a strength. Mm. So it's a cycle.
With that there, you saying people didn't believe you. I mean, is that where the institutionalized racism comes in, that people weren't believing you because of the color of your skin, or was it something else? Like, I'd like to maybe dig into this with you a little bit, if you're comfortable, into the idea that people would use someone like you and say, well, see, Black men can be successful. Look at what Tony's done. But I'd imagine a lot of the elements of institutionalized racism don't go away if you're successful. So yeah, talk about that. Like, even after all you've done, people still not taking you seriously. By your head nod, I know that I'm on the right direction. But for the listeners, tell them about that.
Yes, in every company that I've worked in, I was either the first African American in information technology, the highest ranking African American in information technology, or the highest ranking Black in the entire company. And this is for some of the Fortune 500 companies such as Texas Instruments and Frito-Lay. And I can remember the very first time that I was a manager with hiring and firing authority. I can remember us, all the hiring managers walking into a room. We did this once a week. They had piles of resumes on the desk, and we would start going through the resumes looking for people that we were interested in interviewing. And then afterwards, we would, conduct the interviews, and then all of us would meet with human resources afterwards. And I couldn't help but notice for all the Black applicants, the managers would say, well, we're looking for someone that has good communication skills, good writing skills, and someone who could make presentations. And I'm not so sure that this particular candidate could do this. And whenever they were making those comments, they were always making them about the African American candidates. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking at this and I'm going, well, you couldn't judge the person's writing based off of the resume because all the resumes were perfect. Mm-hmm. They were all articulate during the interviews, but this subjective criteria was being used as a way of eliminating them. Mm-hmm. So with that, I realized that in order for me to progress in my career, I had to take that excuse away. So I found myself in a position of having to look at one of my weaknesses and show that it was not a weakness, but build it into a strength. So I ended up writing articles for professional publications to take away the writing excuse. Then I also started doing speaking engagements at conferences to take away that excuse. And it was easily supported based off of, again, they could just go and find the articles, contact the organization, say, yes, he was indeed a speaker here. So going all through my career was built on addressing the perceptions that they had about African Americans in the workplace.
Yeah.
And so it is interesting in that I ended up being, by the end of my career, what they would consider overqualified mm-hmm. for different positions. So I had to do all these things in order to prove to them that I'm capable of doing the work. And then it's like, pal, mm-hmm. we're sorry, but you're now overqualified.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
it's been an interesting position to be in. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I do is I mentor other individuals that are in the business world and let them know more about my story and the challenges that I ended up facing in corporate America. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah. Go on. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Of course, I've been fired. I've been laid off. I've been through a lot of the challenges that a lot of Black executives go through. Mm-hmm. But I'm real happy to see that the younger generation coming up, that they are indeed addressing these problems head on.
Yeah, for sure. And hopefully, we've got a long way to go, but yes. Moving in the right direction.
And
finally.
In fact, part of my, I guess you might say, activism in distance running and in the corporate world came as a result of my first running role model. When I was at the starting line of my very first marathon, there were about 400 or 500 runners, only about 5 Blacks. And the white runners around me started telling me that I was too big to run marathons. They didn't know me. I didn't know them, but they took it upon themselves to start telling me why I couldn't do this. But my role model was Dick Gregory. People didn't realize that Dick Gregory was also from St. Louis. He was an All-American in track and cross country. And in 1976, he ran from LA to New York and averaged 41 miles a day.
Mm-hmm.
So I found myself thinking, if Dick Gregory can run 41 miles a day, what's 26.2 miles? It's nothing in comparison.
Uh-huh.
That's the thing that was able to motivate me while I was training for my first marathon. And even looking at Dick Gregory's background, since you're in Missouri, did you know that Dick Gregory was the one who was responsible for integrating high school sports in the state of Missouri?
No, I did not know that.
So when he was a junior in high school, he set the state record for the mile. However, they refused to recognize it because it was run at the black track meet, the black state track meet at Lincoln University. So they had the black track meet, state track meet, and then they had the one for the white students. So they refused to recognize his 1 mile record in his junior year. So in September or October of his senior year, he led a walkout of all the black high schools in the St. Louis area and forced them to integrate high school sports in the state of Missouri.
Wow.
So his activism actually started as a result of distance running and failure to recognize his accomplishments.
Wow.
And that next year, by the way, in his senior year, he did come back and won the mile. And his younger brother, Ron, came back, and not only did he win the mile, but he also set the national high school record for the 1 mile.
Thank you to Tracksmith for sponsoring this episode of the Running for Real podcast. It is now the time of year where shorts can come back out. And I don't know about you, but I am loving being back in shorts. I much prefer running in shorts. And I'm really enjoying back again this year, the session speed shorts. I love this kind of tealy grey colour that I have got the shorts in. I'm just looking at, it's called Spruce, the colour that I have, which I really enjoy. And there are plenty of darker colours if you want to stick to that. I also really like the charcoal colour. Those shorts are really comfortable. They last well. I can do 2 runs with those in the summer, and they're just really, really nice to be wearing. I'm also a big fan of many of the Tracksmith tanks. I've mentioned this before, how much I like running in the Harrier tank, the Van Cortlandt tank, the Twilight tank, the Horizon tank. I am a very big tank kind of girl, and they are just really comfortable for day-to-day use, and then also for running. I tend to wear them in my day-to-day life and then wear them for running the next day, or honestly a few days later. They're really comfortable and enjoyable. And if you want to get to know the brand a bit more, they have a fantastic journal. If you go to journal.tracksmith.com, where you can learn a bit more about the community, you can hear stories from people who work at the company, as well as athletes that they work with, like Mary Kane and Nick Willis. They also are doing a lot to support the running community, including some of those going towards the Olympic trials. And yeah, the clothing is just fantastic, really thoughtfully done. You can go to tracksmith.com and use code TINA15 to get $15 off your order of $75 or more. There is a reason I am working with this company again and again. I really believe in what they're doing. They are supporting us with Running Realized as well. Just a great company to get your stuff from, really good high quality stuff, but also just a genuine brand as well. Go to tracksmith.com, use code TINA15 to get $15 off your order of $75 or more.
So his activism actually started as a result of distance running and failure to recognize his accomplishments. Wow. And that next year, by the way, in his senior year, he did come back and won the mile. And his younger brother, Ron, came back, and not only did he win the mile, but he also set the national high school record for the 1 mile.
Cool. Great. Thank you for sharing that. That is, yet another example of how racism is just embedded into things, but also what a guy. And easy to see why he would have been your role model, your inspiration. So definitely going to do some more reading up on what else he's done, because if that's what he was doing in high school, I can imagine that there's some real defining moments from then on. Let's talk about the running community in general. Like, have you felt? I mean, you mentioned there about people saying you were too big to run marathons, but what about have things changed since that time? Do you feel more welcome? Do you feel like now things are changing? I mean, it's difficult to know because we haven't really had a racing season since the pandemic and since all the social justice movements got going. But what would be your message to the running community who is listening today, in just the way about thinking about how they treat people, and not just Black runners, but all people of color, all underrepresented groups? What would be your message there?
I would say
that's a huge question.
To give us basically the same opportunities that have been afforded everyone else. Mm-hmm. As an organization with the Black Marathoners Association, I'd like to say that for the last 16 years, what we've been doing is we've been planting seeds all throughout the country to improve distance running for African Americans as a way of, one, lowering our healthcare costs, getting us off of medications associated with diabetes, high blood pressure, and hypertension. So we've been planting these seeds for the last 16 years. What we need the running industry to do is to help provide the fertilizer for those seeds. They've been reaping the financial benefits as we've seen an exponential growth of African Americans in distance running. Mm-hmm. But as an organization, we have not seen them invest financially in the National Black Marathoners Association. So for 16 years, I've literally gone to all the major players in the running industry, pleading and begging for financial support. And it hasn't happened. However, they continue to reap all the benefits as more Blacks get involved in distance running. We're buying the shoes, we're buying the clothing, we're buying everything. And they've seen an increase in revenues as a result of this. Mm-hmm. And we would just like for them to share some of those revenues with our organization so that we can continue to expand our programs and reach further into the African American community.
Yeah, thank you. Great point. I want to go on in a second to talk about exactly what you're doing with the. Do you usually shorten it to NBMA, or do you just say National Black Marathoners Association? Okay.
NBMA.
Yeah. Okay. So before I get to that, in the Running Realized episode with Marilyn and Samia, we talked about what we can do to get Black youth into distance running over what primarily they either move towards or get pushed towards the sprints. What is your perspective on what can be done there? How can we get more people into distance running at an early age?
My perspective actually came from when I ran the St. Louis Marathon. And this is prior to us forming the NBMA in 2004. When I was running the St. Louis Marathon, unbeknownst to me at the time, the course ran right by the projects that I used to live in. And as I was running in that area, there were some Black kids that were sitting on the curb that saw me coming. And I kind of started talking to them, and they actually ran 2 or 3 blocks with me while I was talking with them. And it occurred to me that I probably served as a role model for them. Yeah, and every Black runner that they saw running by probably represented a role model. So one of the things that we started doing as an organization was we realized the importance of an education to pull people out of poverty So we started offering college scholarships. And as of today, we've awarded over $45,000 of college scholarships to these African American children.
Mm-hmm.
We also recognize that at a lot of the major races, they have a component where they go into the inner city and they'll train kids for, maybe to run a marathon. There may be a 10 or 15 week program where they'll run a mile a week. And maybe for the last mile, they'll actually cross the finish line of that marathon.
Oh, cool.
But unfortunately, those children are going back to homes where the adults really don't support distance running. And the kids really need something to keep them motivated. So what we'd like to do is we would like to develop a trading card series of African Americans who have been inducted into the Distance Running Hall of Fame and give a pack of those trading cards to those children so that they could, take it home with them. And, they may want to put one of them up, on their, on their wall or on their dresser, but it's something that can inspire and motivate them throughout the year. Now, some people have said, well, hey, that's great. You can make an app for this and all this. And I've said, well, wait a minute. You have to remember there's a technology divide.
Yeah.
Give them something physical to hold. Give them something to look forward to every year that they participate in this program. So that, for example, is one of the things that we would love to do in order to reach, the elementary school kids and the middle school kids. So maybe, when a young lady will get her card of Marilyn Bevans, she'll sit there and she'll go, well, wow, this is the first African-American woman to run under 3 hours in a marathon. I want to be like her one day. Mm-hmm. So we want to, again, that would be one of the things, for example, that if someone were to step up and say, hey, we would love to fund this project for you. I mean, it's giving back to the community. It's low-hanging fruit. It doesn't cost a lot of money, but it can have a huge impact on the lives of young runners. Mm-hmm. I was just talking with gentleman. I'm going to have to get my glasses. In fact, I was just talking with Reggie McAfee. Now, he's not a household name, but he is the first African-American to run a mile in under 4 minutes.
In 4 minutes or under 4 minutes?
In under 4 minutes.
Okay, yeah.
So he and I were talking last week, and he started a program called Cross Country for Youth, where he's going into elementary schools and middle schools and starting cross-country programs. Okay. Where these kids are going to be out there. It's a 10-week program. It costs $150 per student. And I'm looking at this and I'm going, this is a great opportunity, but it's a question of funding.
Yeah.
Again, it's low-hanging fruit. So we're going to try to partner with them to see what we can do to help raise funds for his organization.
Yeah. Okay. So, I can't promise that any people with massive financial spending will be listening to this, but is there a place to donate? I mean, we can hope. Is there a place to donate on the National Black Marathoners Association website for people if they want to, maybe support in a way that they can?
Yes, if they just go to blackmarathoners.org. Mm-hmm. And there on the home page, there's a button that they can indeed click to make a donation.
Okay, great.
We're a nonprofit organization. We've been nonprofit from day one. And like I said, we truly want to make an impact on the running community as well as to help students through college. Last year, for example, of course, the pandemic hit in March, and we had reached out to our students who are in college, and we realized that they may not be able to work this summer. Their parents may not be able to work. Yeah. And they were definitely going to need more money probably to help them through this past academic year. So I reached out to our members and said, hey, listen, the races have been canceled. You're sitting on this money that you had allocated for race entry fees. Let's donate it to these, let's make a donation to us so we could increase the amount of scholarships that we were going to give these students. And thanks to their donations, we were literally able to double the amount that we gave them.
Oh, great.
When I reached out to one of the recipients, they said, well, Mr. Reed, our classes have now gone online and we don't have computers. Do you think instead of, giving the money to the university and the money, they apply it to our scholarship, do you think you can give the money directly to us and we could buy computers? So I said, well, hold that thought for a minute. So I reached back out to our members and described the situation with them, because now you're looking at the technology divide between, that exists within our country. And one of our members stepped up and said, I'll donate the max.
Amazing.
So this is through the Atlanta Life Insurance Company. So they ended up donating the max, and we were able to, again, give those to these college students. So, that's where the running community all kind of pulls together to help each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And I highly encourage people to go to the website, go donate what you can afford, what you can do, and then, stay engaged here. This is really important stuff and could make a huge difference. So thank you for sharing that, Tony. Finally, to wrap up, your book From Road Race to the Rat Race, can you just tell us what that is? Give us a bit of a summary of what that's about and where people can go find it.
Yes. Over the years, I had spoken at a lot of colleges and universities around the country. And the students always said, well, you really need to write an autobiography about these different experiences that you've had in corporate America, which is the rat race, as well as in distance running, which is the road race. And so the struggle that I had with writing an autobiography was it just didn't fit, going from, writing from this is when I was born all the way to the current point in time. And just listening to the National Public Radio, and a gentleman said that he ended up writing a series of essays about his life. And after he wrote these individual essays, he then grouped them together in chapters and created his book. So I would literally go out for a run in the morning, come back and sit down and write about just whatever popped up in my head. And then after I had written, I guess around 200 pages, is when I started grouping all these essays together in a book. So I write about some of the more unusual things that happen in corporate America. For example, imagine going into work on your very first day and your office is being used as a storage room. Now, your manager knew that you were going to be coming for at least 3 weeks. And he didn't even bother to make your office available.
Yeah.
So I was, again, the highest ranking black in IT at this particular company. My manager did not take me out to lunch that first week, which is usually normal. That first day, he didn't even take me out that first week. He hardly saw me that first week or even introduced me to anyone. So several people around the company found out about my mistreatment. And so they all took me out to lunch on Friday, all in my first week. That the next Tuesday, I got called in to this guy who was essentially like the VP of the company. And he was really angry. He was really upset. And he hands me this letter. And this letter was signed by 12 of my 13 staff members who were all white. And in this letter, they said that they felt that I was trying to replace all of them with black employees. And that there was a clandestine off-site meeting in which I was present and I was meeting with all the other blacks there at this company, talking about how to replace them.
Oh my God.
It was amazing. This is only, again, second week on the job. the lunch was not all African Americans. They said that this VP was there and paid for it with corporate money. He wasn't even at the lunch. But there was just this fear of having a Black manager is what triggered this particular response.
Yeah.
I mean, it's things like that happen to me in corporate America.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think to you it's probably not shocking. Like that's one of the things you had to go through, and we might now think, well, that was in the past. That doesn't happen now, but it does. It does. Yeah. So we're not off the hook here, and that is exactly why these conversations need to happen and will continue to happen. So, Tony, thank you for sharing, for your vulnerability, your courage, for the fight you have in you to keep pushing and supporting other people. I appreciate you so much, and I think the listeners will too. So, thank you for sharing your story with us today.
Okay, well, thank you very much for having me. This has been fun.
Before we end this episode, I just want to take a moment to shout out my podcast editor, Jeremy Nessel, who has done such a wonderful job of looking after my podcast, taking out all the mishaps in the episodes, while still keeping in the vulnerability and the realness and the rawness of the conversation. This is not one of those podcasts where I take out the ums and the ers and the sometimes the delay in words, because I think it's very important to keep that authenticity. We're surrounded by perfected and manicured everything, and I think it's really important that Running for Real stays that way. So thank you to Jeremy for your work. I also want to thank Maria Vargas and Amber Moore, who are also part of my team. They've been a big part of this community and me being able to build this brand. So just want to give them a shout out too. All right, let's get right back to the end of this episode. He is just awesome. I really appreciate that guy. And be sure you do what we said about going to send a letter to get Ted Corbitt put on a stamp. I have done it, and I'm really proud to have done it. And I think we should get as many of the Running for Real community members as possible to go do this. That would be such a cool thing to be a part of and know that we were part of making a change. And it would be a cool collector's item. I mean, how nice would that be to be able to send your letters and have a picture of one of the fathers of distance running, Ted Corbitt, on your mail? I absolutely love the idea. So be sure to go to the show notes. You can find links in the show notes at not tinamuir.com. Keep going to say that. At runningforreal.com/episode 242. That's runningforreal.com/episode 242. You can find a link to that. You can also find links to our sponsors. I want to give them a thank you. I want to thank Momentous for sponsoring this episode. As I said, I've been using the Brain Drive in my work mornings, and I can't believe the difference of focus it made. The other morning I think I had 3 hours worth of work, and I did 2 1-hour blocks of focusing on one task. So 2 separate tasks that I did for 1 hour. No like switching between checking emails, doing other things, just those 2 things. I was really proud of myself. And the only difference was that I had taken the Momentous Brain Drive. So definitely go check that out, and you can get 20% off your order at Momentous by going to livemomentous.com and using code TINA. I also want to thank Inside Tracker for sponsoring this episode. As I mentioned, I have been getting my blood work done recently, and it is just a fantastic service that you can be checking on what your body is up to. I've been using it for years, and I just had another check-in recently. So you can go to insidetracker.com/Tina to get 25% off their store. That's insidetracker.com/Tina to get 25% off. I'm really thankful to them for helping me to keep on track on top of what my body is up to. And finally, to Tracksmith, my favorite clothes that I'm wearing all the time, not just for running, but just for life. They are wonderful, comfortable, and made by runners who really, really care about our world. So you can go to tracksmith.com and use code TINA15 for $15 off your order of $75 or more. There again are links to all of those in the show notes. You can go to runningforreal.com/episode 242 to check that out. And be sure to go subscribe to Running Realized if you have not already. I'll see you on Monday.